Unaware of wife's $200 million inheritance, husband divorced wife by text message after she lost her job. What she did next, he didn't just walk away. He ended a 10-year marriage with a text, "It's over, papers coming, take care." That message arrived the same night Grace Coleman lost her job. She sat at a candlelit dinner table she had prepared for two, the food cold, the house silent except for the soft buzz of the phone that ended everything. Across town, Ryan Coleman, her husband, was laughing over champagne with Amber, his design partner, celebrating what he called a clean break. But Ryan never knew the truth. Grace wasn't just a heartbroken, unemployed wife. She was the only heir to her late father's $200 million fortune, money she could access only after being unemployed for 60 days. She had always known about the inheritance trust. She just never knew its full, staggering value. Her father, wary of opportunists, had placed the estate under a strict vulnerability clause. The full details in the $200 million principal were to be kept secret by his lawyer, only to be revealed if Grace ever faced a true crisis, like the one Ryan had just created. While he thought she was shattered, she was making a phone call. Grace didn't reply to his message. She didn't chase, didn't cry. Instead, she opened the unlocked drawer in her home office desk, the one he never noticed, and pulled out the pendant with her family crest and a simple business card. Her father's words echoed in her mind, "Your silence will protect you when truth needs time." And so, she stayed silent, watching, waiting, planning. This isn't just a story about betrayal, it's about calm turned into power. Stay till the end. What she did next changed everything. The sharp hiss of sizzling bacon filled the air, breaking the morning stillness. Grace Coleman flipped the pan too quickly, grease popping against her wrist. But she didn't flinch. She was used to small burns, they healed faster than emotional ones. At 36, Grace looked like the kind of woman life had taught to keep moving, no matter how tired she was. Her dark hair was tied back, face clean, simple, not because she didn't care about beauty, but because she valued peace more. She moved with a quiet efficiency, a habit formed from years of balancing a demanding job and a marriage that required more and more of her. Across the kitchen island sat Ryan Coleman, 38, her husband of 10 years. Athletic build, charming smile, the kind that could sell anything to anyone. He was scrolling through his phone, eyes locked on the screen, laughter low and private. Grace glanced over her shoulder. "You'll be late again if you keep laughing at your phone instead of eating." Her tone was light, almost teasing. Ryan didn't look up. "Just business stuff," he said, smirking. The phone buzzed again, a message flashed, briefly across the glass, before his thumb swiped it away. "Amber, see you at lunch." The words burned into Grace's mind. Amber. He'd mentioned that name before. A new design partner, a consultant. Grace had tried to ignore the knot it tied in her stomach. She didn't react, didn't blink. She just turned off the stove, plated the food, and whispered softly, "Business must be good these days." He didn't answer. He was already standing, already checking his reflection in the microwave door, straightening his tie. Grace's hand trembled slightly as she reached for a drawer in the small home office nook in the corner of the room. The bottom left drawer, the one Ryan never touched. It was filled with her personal stationery, old journals and tax documents. It wasn't locked, it was simply hers. Inside, beneath a stack of old letters, lay a velvet box and a pendant engraved with her family crest, two intertwined wings surrounding a single diamond. Her late father's symbol. The weight of his memory pressed down like gravity. 3 years earlier, a man with silver hair and a calm voice sat across from her in a law office. Mr. Benson, her father's longtime attorney, placed a sealed folder before her. "Your father's estate is in a discretionary trust, Grace," he said, his voice gentle. "You will receive a generous quarterly stipend, enough to live comfortably. The full principal, however, is to remain confidential." Grace's breath caught. "Confidential? And Ryan? He's my husband?" Benson's eyes were kind but firm. "Your father requested complete secrecy. Not even your spouse may know." He was cautious. He saw how charming Mr. Coleman could be. He added what he called a vulnerability clause. "My instructions are to reveal the full extent of the trust only if you are ever in a position of significant personal or financial distress. A major job loss, a divorce, a moment where you are truly alone and unprotected." He Wanted you to know your own power, not to have it used by someone else. She had nodded slowly. Then I'll keep it buried. From that day, she carried the secret alone. She didn't know the full amount. She just knew she was safe. She lived on her stipend and her own salary, wanting a quiet life, a love that wasn't measured in numbers. Back in the present, Ryan's voice jolted her. You shouldn't work so hard, Grace. You stress too much. She turned, forcing a smile. Hard work built what we have. He kissed her cheek absent-mindedly, eyes still on his reflection. Yeah? Well, maybe it's time you let me handle the finances for a change. She laughed softly, setting the plate before him. Handle what? He'd been handling their joint account, the one her stipend funded for 6 months, and it was always surprisingly low. He'd claimed startup costs for his new design venture. He didn't answer. His phone buzzed again. Another message. Another. Smirk. Grace's eyes flicked once more to the open drawer, to the pendant gleaming faintly, to the envelope marked Confidential Trust Activation Clause. Logic fix. This is now just old letters. The real info is with the lawyer, making the drawer seem realistic. Her mind wandered to her father's voice echoing years ago. If a man ever makes you feel small, remember, Grace, your silence can be louder than his pride. She closed the drawer gently and slipped the key, now just a small desk key, not a secret key, back into her apron pocket. Ryan finally looked up. Did you say something? Grace smiled faintly. No, honey, just thinking about how unpredictable life can be. He grabbed his jacket and headed toward the door, phone still in hand. Don't wait up. I might have a late lunch meeting. Her eyes followed him, expression calm but unreadable. As the door shut, her gaze drifted to the pendant once more. The morning light hit it just right, and for a moment it glowed like a warning. Grace whispered to herself, almost a promise. Some secrets protect more than they hide. She took a deep breath, steady but heavy, then looked out the window. Ryan's car pulled away. Grace stood still for a long moment, the silence humming. Then she turned off the stove, cleaned her hands, and glanced at the family photo on the fridge. The hum of her phone broke the stillness. A work email blinked across the screen. Mandatory company-wide meeting. Today at 1 p.m. Her eyes lingered on the subject line. Something in her chest tightened the kind of unease that doesn't come from nowhere. She didn't know it yet, but by nightfall, that email would change everything and her secret would finally awaken. The conference room buzzed with polite laughter, but beneath it, tension moved like static. Grace Coleman stood near the back, clutching a file folder so tightly the edges bent. She wasn't supposed to be here. Ryan had called that morning. His tone rushed but charming, the same voice that always made her forgive too easily. Could you come to my pitch today? It's at 12:30. It'd mean a lot, Grace. Investors always like seeing a supportive wife. She had looked at her own calendar, her stomach dropping. The mandatory 1 p.m. meeting. Ryan, I can't. I have that all-hands mandatory meeting at 1 across town. It's the one about the restructuring. I have to be there. Please, Grace, he'd begged, his voice dropping. It'll be quick, I swear. You'll be in and out. Just be there for the first 5 minutes. It makes the investors feel secure, seeing I have a stable home life. Please, for me. She had sighed, giving in as she always did. Of course. Now, watching him at the head of the table, full of confidence, she couldn't tell if he needed her or the image of her. He looked every bit the man he wanted to be. Navy suit, polished smile, gestures rehearsed. Around him sat a half-dozen potential clients, all charmed. But Grace saw something the others didn't, the small lies hidden behind his confidence. She knew their rent was 2 months late, his credit cards maxed, his business proposal recycled from her old marketing plans. Still, she'd covered his overdue rent that morning with her personal savings. Because that's what she did, she fixed what he broke. Ryan's voice filled the room. Our design team believes in simplicity, class, and emotional connection. It's not just design, it's experience. The door opened quietly. Amber stepped in mid-20 seconds. Confident, striking, the kind of woman who always seems like she knows the camera is on her. Her red heels clicked softly against the floor. Sorry I'm late, she said, smiling directly at Ryan. Grace blinked, unsure who she was. This must be the Amber from the text. Ryan brightened. Everyone, this is Amber Lane, our design consultant. She's been helping me refine the visual concept. Amber crossed the room and handed him a folder. Their fingers brushed. A small private smile passed between them, too brief for the clients to notice, but long enough for Grace to feel it like a physical blow. Amber took a seat, sliding into the empty chair beside Ryan. Your tie looks perfect, she said lightly. Told you that color would bring out your eyes. The room laughed politely. Grace smiled too, a frozen, brittle expression. But her fingers tightened around her folder. She had picked his tie that morning. Ryan gave a modest laugh. She's got an eye for details. Grace's smile faltered. Her mind drifted for a moment back to when she used to pick his ties, iron his shirts, stay up late reviewing his proposals. Now another woman's compliment echoed where her care used to live. The meeting continued, filled with numbers and strategies, but Grace's attention was elsewhere. She checked her watch. 1:10 p.m. Her heart dropped. She was already late. The mandatory meeting was starting right now, across town. Every time Amber leaned closer to whisper something to Ryan, he laughed, not his usual laugh, but the soft, flirtatious one she hadn't heard in months. Still, Grace stayed supportive, steady, pretending everything was fine. That was her role, the quiet anchor. After the meeting, investors shook hands, promising follow-ups. Amber gathered her laptop, smiling at Grace for the first time. You're Ryan's wife, right? So nice to meet you. He talks about you all the time. Grace forced a small laugh. All good things, I hope. Amber's eyes flickered something between guilt and amusement. Of course, she said, then turned back to Ryan. Lunch after this? We should finalize that presentation deck? Grace looked at Ryan, expecting him to decline. Instead, he nodded easily. Yeah, sure. Grace, you don't mind, do you? Her throat felt dry. No. Go ahead. I have to get back to work. I'm late. She didn't add that she'd skipped lunch already or that she was heading back to an office in a state of panic. Ryan kissed her cheek, a public gesture for politeness, not affection, and followed Amber out. Grace stood still, watching them leave together, their laughter echoing down the hallway. For a long moment she just stood there, her folder clutched against her chest. Then she sighed softly, whispering to herself, he's just working. That's all. But her heart knew better. Grace turned to leave, shoulders straight, smile fixed. Her reflection in the glass wall caught her attention, tired eyes, fading warmth, and a flicker of fear. As she stepped into the elevator, her phone buzzed a new, urgent email from her boss. Grace, where are you? Harlan from HR is here. By this time tomorrow, Grace's world, her marriage, her work, her faith in everything steady would begin to fall apart. The sound of paper ripping sliced through the quiet office. Grace's hands trembled as she tore open the envelope stamped confidential. Inside was a single page with her name printed in bold. Notice of employment termination. Her heart skipped. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. The walls around her seemed to shrink. A knock came at her open door. Mr. Harlan, her HR manager, a kind man in his 50s with gentle eyes, stepped in, holding another folder. Grace, can we talk for a minute? She nodded, though her throat felt dry. He sat across from her, folding his hands carefully, as if even his body language needed to soften the blow. You've been one of our best project managers. This decision, it wasn't personal exactly. Grace forced a small, polite smile. Budget cuts? Harlan sighed. Corporate's restructuring. Half the department's being let go. But Grace, it wasn't supposed to be you. We had you on the retained list. You were pivotal to the new project. Her head snapped up. What? Then why? The 1 p.m. meeting today was mandatory, Harlan said gently. It was to announce the new strategy. Your name was called to lead the new team. When you didn't show, and with you already being late from lunch, with no call, management took it as a sign you were disengaged. You know how corporate is. They took it as a sign you'd already checked out. They moved you to the terminated list. I fought for you, Grace, but my hands were tied. I'm so sorry. His sympathy only made it worse. She felt the sting in her chest. She hadn't just lost her job. She had lost it because she chose to support Ryan. Her loyalty had been the weapon used to fire her. I understand, she whispered, though her voice cracked. When he left, she sat alone, staring at her reflection in the black computer screen, her own tired eyes staring back. She thought about Ryan. About his words at breakfast. Maybe it's time you let me handle things. Maybe he'd been right, or maybe this was the beginning of something she couldn't yet see. Grace packed her small box of belongings, framed photo of her and Ryan, a coffee mug, a potted plant. When she reached the elevator, her phone buzzed in her hand. She typed quickly, her vision blurring from unshed tears. Had a terrible day. Lost my job. Please, I just need you tonight. Her finger hovered over. Send. For a second she hesitated, then hit send and exhaled. The elevator doors closed, reflecting her pale face. A cafe across town, laughter echoed over the sound of clinking glasses. Ryan Coleman leaned back in a booth, phone on the table. Across from him sat Amber Lane. Your pitch went great, she said, smiling. Those investors love confidence. Ryan smirked. I've been working for this chance for years. Finally feels like things are turning around. His phone buzzed. The screen lit up. Grace. Had a terrible day. Lost my job. Please. I just need you tonight. For a brief second, his jaw tightened. He stared at the message, thumb hovering. Amber noticed. Something wrong? He flipped the phone face down, forcing a grin. Nothing important. Just home stuff. Amber tilted her head. You can't carry dead weight forever, Ryan. Some people hold you back without meaning to. Her tone was soft, but the words hit like glass. He hesitated the smallest flicker of guilt before covering it with a laugh. You think too much. Amber smiled, leaning closer. No, I think clearly. She's unemployed now? Ryan, this is your chance. You can't support her and launch the business. It's time to make a clean break. Outside, sunlight spilled across the street. Ryan's mind drifted for a moment to Grace, probably sitting at home, devastated, waiting. He could text her back. He could tell her everything would be fine. Instead, he turned his phone over again, ignoring the unread message. He picked up his glass. You're right. To new beginnings. Back to Grace. She stepped off the bus, clutching her box, the weight of the day pressing on her. She looked up at the afternoon sky. Her phone remained silent. No reply. The wind tugged at her hair as she whispered, maybe he's busy. But deep down, a quiet voice whispered something colder. Maybe he just doesn't care. She didn't know that miles away, her husband was laughing with another woman. And as she walked toward home, she passed a jewelry shop window. For a brief second, she stared at the image, her face, her wedding band, and something in her heart cracked. By the time her phone finally buzzed again, it wouldn't be the comfort she was waiting for, it would be the message that ended everything. The clock ticked loud enough to feel cruel. Grace sat at the dinner table, hands folded, eyes on the flickering candles that had already burned halfway down. The food was cold now, salmon and roasted vegetables, the meal she made every Friday night, because Ryan once said it reminded him of their honeymoon. Only tonight, he was 2 hours late. The sound of rain outside was soft but steady. Grace checked her phone again. No message, no call, nothing. She stared at the screen, then back at the empty chair across from her. He probably got caught in traffic, she whispered, trying to sound calm. Or maybe the pitch ran long. But in her chest, something hollow stirred. He knew she'd lost her job. He knew she was hurting, and he wasn't here. The front door never opened. The clock moved past 9. The candles melted into stubs. Finally, the phone buzzed. The vibration echoed, sharp as thunder. Grace's hand trembled as she picked it up. A single message glowed on the screen. It's over. Paper's coming. Take care. Her breath caught. The words blurred for a moment, her pulse loud in her ears. She reread them twice as if they could somehow change on the third try. But they didn't. A soft sound escaped her, not a scream, not even a sob, just a breath that broke. She placed the phone on the table gently. She didn't move for a long time. Her eyes fixed on the screen's glow, waiting for it to light up again. Nothing came. The rain kept falling. Her fingers brushed the edge of the pendant hidden beneath her blouse, the small family crest. Her mind ran through memories like snapshots. Their first apartment, the laughter, the plans. It all played in silence now. Then came a flash of anger, small but fierce. He didn't even call. 10 years, divorced by a text, On the same day she told him she lost her job. Tears gathered but refused to fall. Instead, she stood, picking up her phone again. Her thumb hovered over the call button. She typed, "Ryan, please. What does this mean?" Before she could press send, another message arrived, a short one. "I'm sorry. Don't make this harder." Her knees nearly buckled. The phone slipped from her hand, landing on the hardwood with a dull thud. She sank into the nearest chair, shaking. The glow of city lights spilled into a modern apartment. Ryan Coleman stood near the window, shirt undone, a drink in his hand. Behind him, Amber Lane leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. "She deserves the truth," she said. "You said you'd end it clean." Ryan's jaw tightened. "I did. I texted her." Amber stepped closer, her hand sliding onto his shoulder. "Then it's done. You're free now." He stared out the window, silent for a moment. His reflection looked unfamiliar. "She'll understand," he muttered, convincing himself. Amber smiled faintly, resting her head against his back. "You did the right thing. Some people just don't belong in the same chapter forever." Ryan closed his eyes. For a second, guilt flickered across his face before disappearing. The candles had gone out. Only darkness and the faint sound of rain filled the house. Grace sat motionless, staring at her phone lying on the plaza floor. She whispered the words, her voice trembling. "Over? Just like that?" Then her eyes hardened slightly. Her grief didn't vanish, it condensed, sharpening into quiet focus. She reached for the pendant again, fingers brushing the small engraving. "You'll know when to use it," her father's voice echoed. What Grace did next would turn that single text into the biggest mistake Ryan Coleman ever made. The crash of a glass shattered the silence. Grace stood frozen, shards of the wine glass scattered across the kitchen floor. Her hand still trembled. The air felt heavy, thick with the scent of burnt candles and untouched food. For a few seconds, she just stared at the mess. Then, slowly, she knelt and began picking up the pieces one by one. Her movements were calm, deliberate. Each fragment caught the dim light, reflecting flashes of memory. Ryan's laughter, his promises, his hand holding hers. In her mind, his voice echoed, "I'll always protect you, Grace. You'll never have to face anything alone." The sound of that old promise felt like a blade. She closed her eyes, pressing the back of her hand to her lips. The dining table still looked perfect, 2 plates, 2 glasses, 1 untouched meal. She stood, carrying the cold plates to the sink, washing them as if habit could erase pain. She washed the plate he'd eaten from every Friday for 10 years. She scrubbed the pan she'd used, the one he'd bought her for their 5th anniversary. But nothing could wash away the silence. When she finished cleaning, she walked toward the living room. She stopped in front of the small wooden drawer under the shelf, the same one that held her secret. Her fingers brushed the brass handle, hesitating for only a moment before opening it. Inside, the pendant gleamed faintly. In the back of the drawer, beneath old letters, was the simple, cream-colored business card Mr. Benson had given her 3 years ago. "Only call this number," he'd said, "if you ever lose your job and your husband. If you are ever truly vulnerable, it will protect you more than you can imagine." She had never wanted to use it, but life had decided otherwise. Grace turned the pendant in her hand, eyes glistening. "He thought I was broken," she whispered, "but I was only beginning." She crossed the room and reached for her phone. For a moment, she hesitated. The contact name, Mr. Benson, father's attorney, glowed on the screen. Her thumb hovered, then pressed, "Call." The line rang twice before a warm, familiar voice answered. "Grace, it's been a long time." She swallowed, her voice low but steady. "Mr. Benson, I lost my job today. And my husband, he just left me, by text." There was a pause, then a slow, knowing sigh. "Grace, this is the vulnerability your father spoke of. You have met the terms. He was right about him. Come by tomorrow morning. Bring nothing, I'll handle the rest." She ended the call and stood in silence, the pendant still in her hand. For the first time that night, her breathing evened out, not calm, controlled. She placed the pendant around her neck. "You always said silence was strength, Dad. I'm starting to believe you." The firelight flickered once, then dimmed. Through the window, a car's headlights passed briefly, Ryan's car, but it didn't stop. Grace didn't move. Her eyes followed the light until it disappeared. By tomorrow, she would learn that losing everything was the key to unlocking a power even Ryan could never imagine. The door to Benson and Associates swung open. The scent of polished wood and old paper filled the air. Grace stepped inside, clutching her bag tightly. Her movements were calm, but her eyes told another story, sleepless, raw. Mrs. Coleman. Mr. Benson, her late father's lawyer, stood from behind his desk. He was in his 60s, kind eyes, white hair. Grace tried to speak, but her voice cracked. "I'm sorry. It's been so long." He motioned gently for her to sit. "No apologies, Grace. Your father made sure you'd know when the time was right." "The vulnerability clause," she whispered. "Precisely," Benson said. He opened a drawer and pulled out a thick, leather-bound folder, sealed with a red wax stamp. "Your father left this instruction to be executed if you lost employment and remained without income for 60 days. Logic fix. This line is removed, as it's the old, flawed logic." "Grace," Benson said. "Your father, he loved you, but he was a cautious man. He saw things in Ryan that you, in your love, were blind to. He didn't want to rule your life, but he couldn't bear to see you taken advantage of. He locked the principal of his estate in a discretionary trust." "I know," Grace said. "The stipend. It helped with the bills." Benson smiled faintly. "That's what he wanted you to believe. You've been living on a very generous stipend, but he forbade me from revealing the full amount unless Ryan proved his suspicions correct." He turned the folder toward her. "Your job loss, followed by his abandonment. You have fulfilled the terms. The trust is now entirely yours, free and clear." He opened the cover. "Grace, your father's company, Coleman Industries, along with his portfolios and properties, the total valuation is approximately $200 million. The words hit her like a sudden gust of wind. She didn't speak. $200 million. Her hands tightened. Her voice came out in a whisper. That can't be right. I knew about the trust, but not this. Not $200 million. Benson's tone remained calm. "Your father built more than one company, Grace. He never wanted you to depend on others, especially not on love that didn't value you." Her chest rose and fell. All this time, while she was begging for affection, forgiving disrespect, covering his late rent, paying off the credit cards he maxed out, she had been the one holding the real power. A tear slid down her cheek, but she wiped it quickly. Benson leaned forward. "Grace, are you all right?" She gave a small nod. "Yes, just processing," he continued. "He wanted you to live quietly until the day you needed strength. I think that day has come." She swallowed hard. "It came sooner than I expected." The sound of champagne corks popping burst through laughter. Ryan Coleman raised his glass high, arm draped lazily around Amber Lane. "To new beginnings," Amber said, smiling. Ryan clinked glasses. "And to freedom. No more scraping by. No more listening to complaints about budgets." Amber leaned close. "You did what you had to. She was dragging you down." Ryan hesitated for a fraction of a second. "Yeah," he muttered. "She'll be fine." Amber laughed. "She's probably crying into her pillow. She's got no job, no husband. What's she going to do?" Ryan forced a smile, but his hand tightened around the stem of his glass. A.T. Benson's office. Grace stared out the window, city lights flickering below. Benson's voice broke the silence. "There is one other matter. The joint accounts and credit cards Ryan was using, they were all funded by your stipend. What, exactly, did he say he was using that money for?" Grace looked at him, her eyes hardening. "He called it business expenses for his new design firm." Benson nodded slowly. "I suggest we find out what kind of business he was running with your money." He handed her a final document to sign. "Your father would be proud." She smiled faintly, but it wasn't the same smile. This one had edges. As she stood to leave, her eyes landed on a small photo on Benson's desk, her father. Under it, a note read, "Strength is quiet until it's tested." Grace traced the words. "Then I guess it's time." She turned to go, tucking the folder under her arm. "The world has no idea what it's found." "About to learn," Benson murmured. Outside, Grace walked into the sunlight, her face unreadable, her silence heavy with purpose. The sound of typing filled the small, temporary apartment Grace had rented, fast and rhythmic. The room was dim except for the glow of two laptops. Lena Morales, early 30s, sharp-minded and loyal, sat beside her, a former co-worker turned forensic accountant. "Grace," Lena said, not looking from the monitor. "Are you sure you want to see this? Once we start digging, there's no unseeing what we find." Grace's hands were clasped in her lap. "I've spent years not seeing Lena. That's what got me here." Lena nodded. "All right, let's start with his email backups. You said he used your joint account funded by your stipend for business expenses?" "Yes. I trusted him." A few taps later, Lena's expression shifted. "Well, trust has a paper trail. The screen filled with spreadsheets, transaction lists, and wire transfers. Amber Design LLC, Amber Interiors, Amber Consulting Services." Each line was another wound. Lena clicked one entry, a $35,000 transfer labeled marketing collaboration. "That's your account, Grace. He moved money from your savings to fund this." Grace's voice was barely a whisper. "He used me to fund her." The room went quiet. Her mind flashed back the day of that pitch meeting, Amber's teasing smile. He hadn't been pitching investors. He'd been pitching her designs, her ideas, wrapped in Amber's name. Lena turned the screen toward her. "There's more. Look here." An email appeared, subject line, "Future plans." Ryan's words. "Once this new business takes off, we'll finally be free." She doesn't need to know. She's so trusting, she never checks the statements. "It's all under your name for now, cleaner that way." Amber's reply. "Perfect." She's too busy trying to be the perfect wife to notice. Grace's hand flew to her mouth. Her body stiffened. Lena hesitated, then asked softly, "Do you want me to keep going?" Grace straightened, wiping her eyes. "Yes, I need to see everything." Minutes passed as line after line of evidence filled the screen, account numbers, transfers, hidden emails. "Look at this," Lena said, pointing. "A charge from Vancini Jewelers, $8,000, coded to client gifts. And here, the Grand Hotel, suite, 5 nights. Client accommodations." Each discovery cut deeper, but also carved something new inside her resolve. Lena exhaled, pushing back. "Grace, this is systematic embezzlement. It's fraud. I can help you file everything tomorrow. You'd win. Easily." Grace's gaze stayed on the monitor. "No," she said quietly. "I don't want to win like that." Lena frowned. "Then what do you want?" Grace looked up, her eyes steady, now calm, almost eerie in their clarity. "I want truth. He just divorced a woman he thinks is broke and unemployed. What's the first thing an arrogant man like that does?" A beat of silence. A slow, cold smile spread across Lena's face. "He files for spousal support." Grace nodded. "Exactly. Let him. I want him to walk into court and demand money from the woman he's been robbing, and I want him to destroy himself trying to hide from it." Lena leaned back, crossing her arms. "That's a dangerous kind of patience." Grace almost smiled. "It's the only kind I have left." The clock ticked. Grace gathered the printed records into a folder. When she finally stood, the pendant at her neck caught the light. Lena watched her go. "Be careful, Grace. People like him. They panic when they lose control." Grace paused at the doorway. "Then maybe it's time he learns what it feels like." She walked out, her silhouette dissolving into the dim hallway. Behind her, the computer screen dimmed, leaving one last file name glowing. Amber Ryan Project, PDF. By the next sunrise, that single file would set in motion the downfall of everything Ryan thought he owned. The gavel struck once sharp, echoing, final. "Court is now in session," the bailiff announced. The sound rippled through the room. Ryan Coleman sat at the plaintiff's table, chin lifted, suit pressed to perfection, his lawyer whispering strategies. But beneath that confidence, there was unease. Beside him, Amber Lane crossed her legs slowly, red dress gleaming. She wore sunglasses indoors. Her expression was smug, but her foot tapped nervously. Across the aisle, the double doors opened. Every head turned. Grace Coleman stepped inside. Gone was the woman who once waited by the dinner table. This Grace moved with calm authority, every step measured. Her tailored black suit framed her like armor. The small pendant around her neck gleamed faintly. She walked to her seat beside Mr. Benson. The courtroom seemed to still. Ryan smirked faintly, leaning toward Amber. She looks like she's playing. Dress up. Amber chuckled softly. Maybe she finally learned how to look expensive. But their laughter faltered when Grace met their gaze, not with bitterness, but with the steady calm of someone who already knew the ending. The judge, Honorable Judge Harper, an older woman with a reputation for precision, adjusted her glasses. Mr. Coleman, she began. You filed for spousal support claiming financial dependency on your ex-wife after marital dissolution. Is that correct? Ryan straightened. Yes, Your Honor. Grace left me with nothing. She controlled our finances, and after her job loss, she emptied the accounts. Murmurs rippled through the room. Grace sat still. Judge Harper turned to Benson. Mr. Benson, your client's response? Benson rose slowly. Your Honor, the plaintiff's statement is false. We have substantial evidence proving Mr. Packen Coleman not only accessed joint funds without consent, but also committed fraud by misrepresenting over $200,000 in personal expenditures as business expenses, directly embezzling from my client's trust stipend. Ryan's smirk vanished, his lawyer tensed. The judge lifted a brow. You have proof of this? Benson nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Permission to submit Exhibit B. He handed a folder to the clerk. The large screen behind the judge lit up with an image. Ryan's email correspondence with Amber. The subject line, future plans. Gasps filled the courtroom. Amber's eyes darted across the text, her name, her words. She turned sharply to Ryan. You told me you deleted those, she hissed. Ryan's jaw clenched. Stay quiet, he whispered. Benson continued. The funds were redirected to Amber Design LLC, a company the plaintiff registered. What's more interesting, Your Honor, is who he registered as the sole owner. He filed all incorporation documents under Miss Lane's name, making her the sole legal recipient of the fraudulent funds. Amber's head snapped toward him. Her face went white. You used my name? The audience stirred, whispers rising. Order! Judge Harper's voice cracked. Silence in court. Amber's face flushed red. You said it was legal. You said it was temporary. You told me that was your money. You told me she was broke. Ryan leaned in close, whispering urgently. Amber, for God's sake, stop talking. But it was too late. The judge turned to her sharply. Miss Lane, do you confirm your signature on those company filings? Amber shook her head, her voice trembling. No, I never signed anything like that. He handled all the paperwork. He said it was to protect his assets. Gasps erupted again. Benson turned toward the judge. Your Honor, my client has no claim against this man. In fact, we request a counterclaim for fraud, forgery, and marital asset theft. Ryan's lawyer stood abruptly, stammering. Your Honor, this is circumstantial, Judge Harper. Slammed the gavel. Quiet. The courtroom went still. The judge's tone hardened. Mr. Coleman, based on the presented evidence, this court finds your petition for spousal support not only baseless, but fraudulent. All remaining shared assets are to be transferred to Mrs. Coleman pending investigation of financial misconduct. Ryan's face drained of color. Wait, Your Honor, please. But her voice cut through his. And Mr. Coleman, I suggest you retain counsel for the forthcoming criminal inquiry. This court will forward documentation to the district attorney's office. A cold silence followed. Amber rose abruptly, shaking her head. I'm not going down for this, Ryan. You said you'd protect me. He reached for her arm, but she yanked it away. You ruined me. Her voice echoed in the chamber before she stormed out, flashes from the press cameras following her. Ryan stood alone now, sweating, shoulders sinking. Across the aisle, Grace finally looked at no anger, no gloating, just quiet, steady truth. He opened his mouth to speak, but she simply said, You always said you'd handle everything. I suppose you finally did. The bailiff approached, handing him a notice, his assets frozen. He stared at the paper blankly, lips parted. Grace, what did you do? She rose calmly, gathering her documents. I didn't destroy you, Ryan. You did that yourself. The courtroom watched her walk out composed, graceful, untouchable. Behind her, Ryan sank into his chair, reporters shouting his name. Benson followed her quietly. Justice was poetic today, Grace. She didn't answer. Her eyes were distant. Outside the courthouse, the wind lifted her hair. She paused, the pendant at her throat catching the sunlight like fire. What waited for her next wasn't peace, it was something far colder and far more powerful than revenge. The courthouse doors burst open. Flashes exploded like lightning. Reporters filled the cell. Steps, microphones raised, voices overlapping, questions sharp and hungry. Grace Coleman, is it true you're worth $200 million? Did your husband really divorce you by text? Mrs. Coleman, what do you plan to do next? The sound was deafening, a wave of chaos, lights and noise. But in the middle of it all, Grace walked forward in silence. Head high, shoulders steady. The same woman who once trembled over a text now moved through a sea of cameras like she was built from glass and steel. Behind her, Ryan Coleman stumbled through the doors, nearly blinded by the flashes. His once perfect suit was wrinkled, tie loose, face pale. The crowd swarmed him instantly. Ryan, any comment about the fraud charges? Is it true you forged your wife's signature? Did you know she was an heiress? His jaw clenched as he tried to push through the chaos. Cameras captured everything. From the corner of her eye, Grace saw Amber Lane shoved forward by the press, her red dress no longer glamorous. She looked furious, humiliated. Amber rounded on Ryan, her voice cutting through the noise. You lied to me, she hissed, loud enough for every microphone. You said you had everything under control. Amber, not here, he muttered, trying to steady her arm. But she yanked away, eyes flashing. You used my name for fraud. Do you realize what you've done to my career? My clients are gone, I've been blacklisted. Her voice cracked. You ruined me, Ryan. The cameras loved it. Reporters shouted, flashes intensified. Amber shoved him hard against a car door before storming off through the crowd, tears streaking her makeup. Ryan stood there, dazed as laughter and shouting filled the air. Every lens turned to him, capturing his downfall. He turned desperately, searching through the chaos until his eyes found Grace a few steps away, calm, centered, untouchable. Grace, he called out, pushing through the reporters. Grace, please wait. She stopped. The crowd went silent, waiting. He stumbled closer, his voice breaking. We can fix this. I made mistakes, I know that. But I thought I was losing everything, and I panicked. Grace turned slowly, her expression unreadable. You didn't panic, Ryan. You chose. He stepped closer, ignoring the cameras. Please, I don't care about the money. I just want you back. We can start over. For a moment, time seemed to hold still. Grace's gaze softened, just slightly. Then she spoke, voice steady but quiet. You left me with a message, remember? Just words on a screen. So here's mine. She took a small breath. I forgive you, Ryan. He looked up, hope flickering. Then, but, she said softly, cutting him off. Forgiveness doesn't mean return. Her voice carried like a whisper, but it was louder than anything. He stared at her, face crumpling. Grace, please. I have nothing left. She tilted her head slightly. Then now you finally understand what you gave me. Nothing. Her words landed like glass shattering. Ryan stood frozen, his shoulders sinking as the weight of his actions finally crushed him. The crowd gasped. Cameras zoomed in. The man who once mocked her strength was now broken before the whole world. Grace, he pleaded, tears mixing with rain that had just begun to fall. I'm sorry. Grace looked at him for a long, silent moment. Then she turned and walked past him, calm, composed. Reporters shouted her name again, but she didn't speak. In the noise, her silence became power. Every step she took forward was another piece of her life reclaimed. As she reached her car, she finally spoke a quiet voiceover. He taught me that silence was weakness, but he was wrong. Silence isn't weakness, it's control. The door closed, shutting out the noise. The cameras caught one last image. Grace looking straight ahead, calm, free, unstoppable. Behind her, Ryan stood on the courthouse steps, drenched, broken, alone as the press surrounded him. Headlines began flashing across screens inside news vans. Text divorce backfires, wife revealed as $200 million heiress. Betrayal turned justice. Grace Coleman wins everything. And as her car disappeared into traffic, the camera lingered on her face, peaceful, distant, yet still fierce. Grace thought the storm had ended, but sometimes even peace hides one last surprise. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. Grace Coleman stepped out, heels echoing against the polished marble floor. The golden logo of her father's company, Coleman Industries, gleamed above the reception desk. Employees turned as she passed. Smiles, respectful nods. Some whispered her name with quiet admiration. For years, she had walked these halls as the founder's daughter. Today, she walked them as the owner. Her pace was steady, her expression calm, but her heart thrummed with emotion. The world had seen her broken, humiliated, betrayed. Now, it would see her rise. She paused before the large portrait of her father that hung near the boardroom, his eyes kind, his smile proud. Her reflection appeared beside his in the glass frame, 2 generations connected by the same quiet strength. Her voice, soft and steady, filled the silence. He left me wealth, but life taught me worth. A gentle breeze from the air vents stirred her hair, carrying the scent of legacy. Her phone buzzed in her hand. The screen lit up. Ryan Coleman, 3 missed calls. A second notification followed. Amber Lane. I'm sorry. Grace stared at them for a moment, thumb hovering over the screen. Then, with one small motion, she blocked them both. No anger, no hesitation. She turned toward the panoramic window. The morning sun streamed through the glass, painting her in gold. The pendant at her neck shimmered, the final symbol of everything she had survived. Her eyes lifted to the skyline, and she smiled, not for victory, but for peace. Some losses, she whispered, are blessings disguised as betrayal. The music swelled, the light brightened.